So today's video is all about how we lost 200,000 euros twice when fundraising for our startup. We will go through how we went from a handshake deal to an investor screaming on my phone just a couple days later, how we were still able to raise 2 rounds with a total of 500,000 euros, and what we did wrong as first-time founders so you don't have to make the same mistakes. And yes, you heard right. It's a fun fact that in our first pre-seed round we actually lost 200,000 euros twice. So this is part 1 of the story, but stay tuned for the second part where we lost 200,000 euros again. The video will be on my channel next week. Hi, I'm Simon, and this video is part of a series where I go and revisit moments from my startup journey and reflect the mistakes that we made for myself, but also for you, so you can save time, energy, and mostly your nerves. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, business, and how to scale your own company, stick around for more videos like this. The entire story starts back in 2021 when we first started fundraising for our startup. In this video, I will not go through the entire journey of our startup, but if you're interested in that, watch this video where I break down the entire story in one video. But to give you some context to the story, we had just launched our physical product that we spent over 1 year testing and validating in our online shop, and the orders were just flying in. And during this time, we actually realized that we might be onto something, that we might have a product market fit, but we didn't have any cash to actually scale the business. And that is when we realized that we actually need to raise a pre-seed round. We have to convince some investors in order to give us some money so we can finance the growth of our company. And back in 2020, 2021, this was the most normal thing for startups to do. Everyone was basically trying to raise money or raising money successfully. So we looked into setting up our own pre-seed round and actually give it a go. Given that we were in our early 20s, we just graduated from university, we were first-time founders and we didn't know what we're doing. We basically started by creating a pitch deck, calculating how much money we actually need in order to reach our business goals and what company valuation we want to offer to the investors. That took a lot of research, networking, and trial and error, but after a couple of weeks we had a pitch deck that we actually felt comfortable to approach our first investors. So yeah, once that was set up, we actually started pitching. So we signed up to events, we tapped our networks and sent out our deck to anyone who could even be remotely interested in investing into our business, or even to people that might know someone that would be interested. After a couple weeks of hard work, lots of pitching, lots of conversations, lots of emails and follow-ups, we actually had some interest but no hard commitments. However, there was this one person, let's just call him Mike for the sake of the story, who showed a little bit more interest, so we actually invited him out to our office. For us, again, coming fresh out of university, convincing a wealthy person to actually invest into our business was a big deal to us, so naturally we were a little bit nervous stepping into the meeting. But given that we have been pitching our company for a couple of weeks at that point, the presentation was actually going very well. So we pretty much talked about how we want to scale this company as fast as possible, to build IP and a brand that consumers can trust, with then the goal to sell it to big players in the market so everyone makes a lot of money. And once we said that, things became a little strange in the meeting, because instead of following our excitement for that growth journey and that potential exit, the investor actually started proposing alternative plans for the company. Instead of selling B2C, which was our plan, he actually recommended selling B2B. Instead of growing fast and burning through a lot of cash, his plan was actually to grow slow and do it in a profitable way. He also recommended to focus on other strengths of the product in our communication, and his whole idea about the future of the company was entirely different from what we just pitched to him. And as inexperienced as we were, we just didn't push back hard enough, which left the rest of the conversation a little bit between the chairs, between his vision and our vision of the company. Because in that meeting for us there was 200,000 euros on the line that he wanted to invest, and we of course didn't want to scare this guy away. And then once the meeting came to its end, to our big surprise, Mike got up and said, "I want to invest 200,000 euros into your business in exchange for 5% of your company equity." And just hearing those words out of his mouth was just mind-blowing to us, because it was the first hard commitment to actually invest into our company once we started talking to investors, and somebody just told us to give us a check over 200,000 euros at a valuation that was actually not too far away from what we were seeking at the time. And in that moment, everything went just super quick, because it was just when we were exiting the meeting room. So we basically said something along the line of, "Okay, sounds good, we will consider it." And all of a sudden we're shaking hands, and in the next moment the guy has left. After the meeting, me and my co-founder still had to process what just happened. Did this guy just offer us all the money that we were seeking for? Did we just raise our round? Is this really happening? And when we came back to our office in the incubator, we experienced that good news apparently traveled very fast. Even though we haven't told anyone at the time, everyone was almost congratulating us on how well the meeting went yesterday with Mike. And we were very surprised, because all we had at the time was just a quick handshake and a deal that was still, from our view, not definite. But once we sat down in our office, everything just started happening automatically, because suddenly our phone started ringing and investors just kept calling our line in order to book some meetings with us. And it seemed like overnight, after we had our first hard commitment from Mike, all the investors in our network that we reached out earlier started calling us in order to book a meeting. It wasn't anything super crazy, but after one short week, we had 5 more hard commitments from investors that wanted to join our pre-seed round. And in our view, this was simply great news, because all of a sudden we had more money to raise, we can reach our goals faster, and we had more expertise in the company. All we had to do was to raise the valuation of the company so we wouldn't give away too much equity too early, because the plan was to raise a Series A round down the road. So as excited as we were, we picked up the phone, dialed Mike's number in order to tell him the positive news. When Mike picked up the phone, I told him, look, we have found more investors, we have more money, we can do more things, we can reach our goals faster, and we can grow the company faster. Isn't that exciting? And what happened next was not exactly how I imagined the call to go. Because instead of joining our excitement, Mike started screaming in the phone something along the lines of, "You guys are idiots, we had a deal, we shook hands," and so on. And at the time, this was a very, very intense moment for all of us, because we were simply blindsided by his emotional reaction. But long story short, Mike was absolutely pissed. He was obviously out. He didn't want to invest into us anymore. And he said that we were behaving super disrespectful and unprofessional, which I guess he had a point in that. But the bottom line was that we were still able to raise the round without him, even though his initial ticket of 200,000 euros was quite big. So that is how we missed out on 200,000 euros in just a couple days. But what are the learnings here, and what should you do different than us? First and foremost, and this is absolutely crucial, your goals as a founder have to align with the goals of your investor. So it's your job as a founder to be absolutely clear about the goal of the company, how much money you need to raise in order to reach those goals, and what kind of investor you want to have as a part of that journey. The goal alignment between founder and investor is one of the most important things when seeking out a fruitful and long-term relationship. In fact, back then I wrote my thesis about exactly that topic, and all the entrepreneurs that I interviewed back then that had long-term relationships with their investors were super aligned on their goals. And in our case, Mike had a totally different path in mind for the company that we were building, which was actually why he was so pissed when we told him that we actually found more investors to join the round. And the reason for that was that our goals were not aligned. He wanted to grow slow and he wanted to have a big piece of the pie, while we wanted to build something that grows very quickly, while multiple people have a smaller piece of the cake. The goal alignment between founder and investor is absolutely crucial, and it's usually the task of the founder and entrepreneur to actually take the first step here. And this is what we did absolutely wrong in our conversation with Mike. The second learning is that there should be no misunderstanding at all after an investor meeting if a deal is actually set in stone and done, or if it's still pending. In our case, from our side, the deal was still pending, and from his side, the deal was already made. And this was obviously a big problem, because he went ahead and communicated to his network that he just made a deal, which is actually pretty stupid in itself and a mistake by the investor at that point. But this was also one of the reasons why he reacted so emotional, because we made him look like an idiot in his network. On the flip side, for us, of course, it helped to kickstart the round, because this triggered the FOMO of other investors that then started reaching out to us. And the third, last and most hard lesson to actually implement is that it's actually okay to say no to an interested investor. At the time, we thought that if we upset Mike or say something that he doesn't like, the pre-seed round would basically be done. And that is an entirely wrong mindset to approach a conversation like that. Because as much as the investor wants to find the right startup to invest, the startup has to also find the right investor for the journey that they're on. And in fact, if you can convince one investor to say yes to investing into your company, the likelihood of you finding a second one is actually much higher. So if you start conversations with investors, just keep in mind that if there is not a perfect fit, that you should think twice about going ahead with that person.